Now you're going to do the ins and
Welcome
outs.
to the conversation. I'm Shannon Taylor, the Executive Director of Blacks and Jews in Conversation, and as you've just seen, those two big mouths in the background are Elliot and Ian Finkle. That's E-L. They spell their name wrong, or I can't help it. And Ian is the one on your right, Elliot is the one on your left, and they're both brothers, and they each happen to like cigars.
Good. Now we have nothing to talk about. Fine.
And now I'm going to turn you right over to them because they're going to do a sea shanty that they gave me before. I think the lyrics are excellent, and I'd like you to hear it.
No. He was talking about that poem we did off camera. That's not for the audience.
Why
That's
not?
private stock. That was a take on Jack London. I forget.
But
his
if
name.
you send us a cigar
Yeah.
from J&R Stores, we will send you the poem.
Yeah, that plug is not going to get us anything, but all right. Now,
All right.
we want to talk about many things, and we don't have much time, especially if you muscle in on it, Shannon. But yeah, we want you to muscle in.
Ask
on it.
us something.
Ask us anything. We like, you know what we like to talk about more than music? We happen to be master musicians. But we like to talk about comedians and comedy. We feel that's the height. But not the ones around today, because you see them plenty. Naturally, they're all around. We like to talk about the old comedians because we had a special relationship with many of the old comics, especially Elliot naturally worked with them very closely.
And our father, of course, who started on 2nd Avenue. I just happen to be holding something here. This is the Five-ish Finkle latest album, Never Too Late, which it's never too late, containing original songs and songs from the great Yiddish vaudeville and Broadway. My brother here produced it. I performed on it. You can hear all the Finkle brothers on this.
Hey, wait a minute, we're on this.
That's right.
How do you like? Can you imagine that?
We had an audition to do it, but we're on it.
Yeah, we auditioned. Took me 3 tries.
right.
Yeah, on a callback I got it to be a Finkle. But it's a very good. Can they see this? Or you have to.
He showed it up there.
Did
This
you
is
show
a
it to
big
them?
budget show here. He
Oh, I
showed it
see
up.
on his
That's
camera.
right,
Big,
that's
yeah.
right.
I see. Turn it over on the other side's a good picture too. Don't be afraid.
That's the
He's holding
picture when our father won the Emmy Award.
Yeah, he's the Finkle with the talent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can buy this record and hear such wonderful songs as Wonderful Girl of Mine, Finkle Salsa, It's Never Too Late, which is sort of his anthem because in his 80s now, his career is just as flourishing as it ever was. And he's our inspiration. You know, we've worked with people where there is
I see that.
no time factor. You keep working.
No, well, look. You see, it has a song in here called "A Show's Not a Show Without a Star." Now, a critic was very lovely. He sent me a letter saying that "A Show's Not a Show Without a Star" should be the new anthem of Broadway. And I wrote him back thanking him naturally, except the trouble is, in order to be an anthem, people have to do it. See? No one's doing it yet. Don't block the camera. Use your own. And then what I want to bring
But they used
out-
it in one of his movies. Remember,
they
he made a
used it. We
movie.
did that's right. the
My
movie.
father starred in a movie called The Urn, soon to be seen at your latest drive-in. And they used this.
That's
the
right.
song,
They used the one you did too. What's the Beat Design Mitmir? They used that.
Right.
See, and what is that in English? A Beat Design Mitmir? Misty. That's a new
Yes,
gag.
that's
You know,
right,
I
that's
use
right.
that. You know.
And but through him, we started with many people. I started with comedians because of my dad working with comedians, and that we all know the old school, like Milton Berle, Sid Caesar, Danny Thomas, Rodney Dangerfield, and so forth and so on. And then you worked with the great singers when you started.
Yeah, but it's funny. I can't think of one of them that was that great. No, I worked with many great singers. I was on the road with many. When we were sidemen.
But why the split? Why one with comics and the other
It
with
just
singing?
worked out
It
that
worked
way.
out
He's
that
a
way, but I
piano-
also, as a
He's a piano
pianist,
player. You go with the comics. I'm a xylophone player. No one uses
And-
xylophone,
and-
but I wrote arrangements.
and I met some
So
of
that's
them
how I went with
through
them.
my Broadway shows and national tours I was involved with, like Sid Caesar. We were doing a new national tour with Anything Goes, and I was working for Ginger Rogers. And we hired him to be the comedian, and we became friends. We're still friends. He's still doing fine in Los Angeles. And
And Elliot got me the job. You remember
Yeah,
writing
we
the
wrote-
arrangements for Ginger
because
Rogers?
Ginger Rogers
Everything.
didn't understand the Broadway sound, which is what the show was originally. She's used to the Hollywood sound, so she told us, "I want the Hollywood sound," and we delivered.
You mean 25 musicians versus 125
Well,
musicians, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it is, though. I'm not saying that the Broadway Pit Orchestra is bad. Don't get me wrong; they have great bands. But the reason the old Hollywood movies from the Ginger Rogers era sound so good, sure, 125 guys blowing away their full air into the horns with a big string section, bigger than some symphony orchestra.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
famous guys in the band, the greatest.
Also, with Hollywood music, it can be far more lush.
Well,
You see, the old Broadway music sometimes doubled the melody a little more.
Doubled a lot with the first
So that they heard,
yeah.
don't forget there were no mics at the beginning,
Yeah,
so
that's
this way
right.
they could hear the melody and stay on pitch.
Yeah. Well, that big and the big orchestras. That's why those strings. You can't get a sound out of 8 strings even in a pit like a Hollywood 50, 60 strings, 30 strings. You know. When a guy calls me up, it's a funny thing. Guy calls me up to play a concerto, on his xylophone. He says, "I want you to do the thing." I say, "Really? What do you got?" He says, "Oh, we have an orchestra." I say, "Really? How big is your orchestra?" He says, "Well, what do you mean? We got 50." I go, "Oh, you have half." See, and that always makes them mad, and I usually lose the job, but that's okay. We haven't got a dime.
That's
Anyway.
why you don't make people mad too often.
We like to make people mad. That keeps them on their toes. You know what I mean? When you're too nice, nothing happens.
No one
It's
ever
more
accused me of that.
Not you. In fact,
Where is that voice coming from anyway? I hear a voice.
He's there. He's in
there
the
he
front.
is.
If you look at the
This
little
studio
screen.
is so big you can't see him. He's about
we had to
4
walk out to change our minds.
That's right.
Let me ask you.
No.
Your father obviously was extremely encouraging and remains so till now.
Yes.
What about your mom? Did she want you to follow in entertainment as well?
Mom was the intelligent one of the
Yeah.
family because she was in show business in certain ways, and because she wrote plays and she had a great knowledge of the business. And on the other way, she was smart. Unlike us, she was an educator. She taught in school. She
read.
and also she helped Dad with his lines. She helped us. She used to type my scripts and not just type them, but give me valuable pointers and editing in terms of how to. So she was very logical, very intelligent, and she kept us all in a sort of some kind of intellectual pathway among all the chaos.
So in other words, she would have preferred us to be lawyers or chefs.
Well, in the Jewish time, if you're a
that's
doctor,
right.
a lawyer,
Yeah.
an accountant.
Get a load over here.
Then
Get a
down
load
there,
of
I
him.
guess violin would be first on the list.
Yeah, and then clarinet.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're Jewish, you tell your mother you want to play xylophone. You might as well tell her you're,
Well,
from the middle of Africa somewhere. or
I was at the extremely moving tribute you paid to Trudy recently, and one of the comments that you made was that even though you grew up, everybody was struggling, the table was always filled with food.
Yeah,
Well, take a look at us.
yeah.
Imagine what they had to pay for food. Mother told us that we went through when I was about, believe it or not, he's a few years older than me. So when I was 8 and you were 12, for instance, we would go through an example of 1 bottle of ketchup per meal. There was never a point at home where they said, "Hey, lighten up the eating."
No.
The only
It was
time
always
they
kind
told me to lighten up once was in the Catskill Mountains. It was Yom Kippur. And they used to have a table spread of food with the New Edgewood Hotel.
Yeah.
And that was for the people that couldn't fast.
That was so far in the woods, the owner was a bear.
That's right. So we would find out where the food was. I don't mind being straight, man. We would find out where the food was, and then we would consume until they finally came up and said, "Hey, you lighten it up a little." We were
Yeah,
eating.
well, that was food for the people that couldn't hold out,
That's right.
the fasting on Yom Kippur,
What happened that Ian, you picked the xylophone? I understand you had a different instrument at first.
Well, I started out on drums and I was lousy. And then I dabbled rather deeply on trumpet, if you recall, and I was worse. And then my teacher who I recently got a photo of. I'll have to show it to you from them. You know the guy in the medical store over there? Forgive me for forgetting his first name now. He'll kill me. You know the medical store on Amsterdam. You know where we go. And I don't know how we got talking, had a picture of my first teacher, Norman Grossman. And he showed me different instruments. He says, you're no good. You got to work in the, at that time, the Astor Hotel in the toilet, like a stevedore. I wouldn't have minded. I don't care. But he had second thoughts. And then he showed me different instruments. Well, the piano, you were already accomplishing the piano. Brass, I failed. The drums, I failed. The string instruments, you have to play when you're 3 years old. I'm already close to 18, 19 years old. Woodwinds I didn't like. I mean, to play, of course, you know, accordion or something, you know. So I tried the xylophone, and I went, hey, wait a minute. And I felt I was cute, and it would get me girls. And you should have told me it was guitar.
Well, I wanted to be an actor because Dad was an actor, and I wanted, so I studied acting. I went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts and HB, but then the thing was, I reached my height. I'm 6'6". You didn't know that.
I know that.
And you see, he knows me personally, and I'm 6'6".
I'm talking like this all my life, yeah. Okay.
And I reached the height by the age of 12. And then I began to wonder, my goodness, what if I kept growing? And then I noticed every year at drama school they gave me the same part, which was Lenny from Of Mice and Men.
Yeah, well.
I said, well, what's Shakespeare? And I know, Lenny. Every year, Lenny.
You could have done Othello, you know.
Well, and then I figured maybe circus, or I don't know what was going to be in my future. But I found the piano. You could say that I found I could express myself. The good thing about a piano is you can play when you're unemployed, and act. It's hard to act when you're unemployed.
You can't hide when you're not working.
So I started, and also you find out in New York growing up that you don't need a job as a waiter or anything to make a living. If you're a pianist, there'll be somewhere. The question is how low are you willing to begin? And you're willing to go. And I went to the bottom. I went to the bottom.
It's all DJs with discs, and they pipe in the music. In those days, places had a live music. In those days, they had a live. There was a pianist in almost every restaurant, or club, and this and that. Naturally, you could work. Not xylophone. Xylophone, once you're out of work, you're finished.
Then I met the Rodney Dangerfield, so I spent many years working at his club.
Had to sell myself on the street.
You see?
Rough, you know.
But you also worked with Theodore Bikel for many years.
No, sure.
Well, that came later. I started at 17 to work with so-called stars. And eventually, through my my brother, so I started with some people from the Yiddish theater, like Molly Pecan, and from her I met Theodore Bikel, who I was with many years. And then through them I toured with Jan Pierce. So through him I worked with a lot of opera stars, and then so you then when I got to Dangerfields, I wound up working with a lot of comedians.
Yeah,
and still doing my own concerts, both by myself or with my brother, all the way through till today, all these decades later. Well, Groucho, we have a mutual pal, Louis J. Stadlin. Now, we met him when he was 19 years old. He was our father's roommate.
That's right.
Touring in Fiddler on the Roof. And Dad recommended him for a show called Minnie's Boys about the Marx Brothers. And I played his audition, and then I wound up coaching him and the other Marx Brothers for the musical. And then we did the Dick Cavett show, and the real Groucho would show up because he had, I guess, interest in the show. And it was the fake Groucho and the real Groucho. And that was the first time I saw a legend walk into a room was Groucho Marx. And I'll never forget it because the only time we met legends prior to that was Smith and Dale at the Agva Hotel in South Fulford. And that was big news, but you go home and say to your schoolmates, Smith and Dale, it didn't carry that much weight.
No one remembers that. Even today, they don't remember.
So, but from that, people thought I was working with Groucho. And then later on, once I started with Sid Caesar and then the others with Rodney Dangerfield, then I did all of them.
It's a funny thing. You just dropped all the names you worked with, so that's pretty good. You had a good career. What happened?
Well, I would have
yeah, because I got nothing. I worked with nothing, and I got nothing.
Well,
My
then-
I may
resume.
be the world's greatest xylophonist, but I can't drop a list of names
What
like
about,
that.
yes, you can, starting with Michael Jackson. Let's go down your list.
That was a half an hour, and he was mad
All
at me
right.
because I looked at him at the session. With
My
the little
resume
boys
would have
there,
been,
and,
my
ooh,
resume would be terrific if this was 1941.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all the good ones I worked with, I think they're all
What
gone
about
too.
the shows you worked on together?
Well, we did many, many
We
shows.
did a lot of shows, but
Well,
that don't
interesting
mean
one
anything.
was we wrote together was a show called Those Were the Days. That was one of our first so-called hits. That was a life story of Molly Pecan with Molly Pecan, and there was an
I can
interesting.
do Molly Pecan.
Go ahead.
I can do Molly Pecan. Molly Pecan's entire repertoire is my entire repertoire of acting was this, and watch quick because it goes by fast. She would hold this again. She would go like this. Okay, I'm done. That's it. Okay.
For those who don't know, Molly Pecan is one of the legends of Yiddish theater.
Yeah.
Not according to the present guests.
No, she was good. No,
She was not only
some regular
But-
shows.
but
she was on not only
Yeah.
the highest or second highest paid in Yiddish theater. Menashe Skulnik, some people say, got as much or more, but she was one of the highest paid in American vaudeville.
Yeah.
She told me at the Palace she was in 1930 she was already up to 3,500 a week.
But you also did Mike Feinstein show on.
Well, that came later, yes.
Later.
And you did
Later on,
Danny,
yes.
The tour of Danny Thomas at Caesar and Milton
Yeah.
Berle.
Yeah, that
Right.
came later. Yeah, that was
Later.
Legends of Comedy. Yeah, okay, but that all came in later in our careers when we were adults, as we say.
Now I got somebody to introduce you to. His name is Eddie Friedfeld, and he was one of the
Who is he?
senior consultants on the show Make 'Em Laugh that was just on public television. And
Okay.
he did the autobiography with Sid Caesar, and Sid Caesar told him, "I adore the Finkle family." And when he heard
Oh,
that,
he remembered our names?
He mentioned your names according to Eddie many times. Eddie's a close friend, and Eddie would like to meet you. So I'd like to set that up someday. You are
Okay.
not forgotten. You
Ah.
are far from you. Are
You're telling
Well,
me
you know-
we're not
Revered
forgotten. There's a lot of
virtuosos.
people that call
Since-
me up every day and say, I remember you. You owe me so much. Yeah.
Sid Caesar was a genius, and everybody has their own genius. But his genius was a pantomime, as an example, was amazing, where he can do a simple sketch called "A Man Getting Up in the Morning," and it'd be hilarious. We both appeared in sketches with him. We did a show we put together for Sid for the Village Gate some years ago, where we both got to remember we did the movie sketch.
house thing. But also, he
And-
was a master at dialects.
Yes,
His
the
dialects.
sketch
yeah,
comedy.
Sketch comedy was.
And he thought like a musician because he started out as a sax player.
That's right.
In fact, when I was conducting Anything Goes with him, I first met him. And I'm watching him from the pit. And we were touring. In fact, when you're touring shows, people assume you're the composer. People come up to me all the time. Mr. Porter, great meeting you. And he was interesting because he would keep time with his foot all through the show, like people do, like in a rhythm. And I knew he was a musician, so I went up to him and I said, "What is that?" And he says, "Well, that's where the laughs were."
That's right. He had
And every
that
night I'd
going
watch,
like
every
this,
time
yeah.
his foot went on the floor, that's where the laughs
I
were.
saw it. I saw him do that. That was amazing.
And his rhythm was always musically worked out, so it was the same thing with Milton Berle. We would sit there, and he would go over all the jokes he would put on tape, and then there had to be a definite rhythm. We would discuss, should we take the word "and" out, or the word "but," or so that everything has a beautifully worked
Sure,
out
it's
music.
like a piece of music.
It's got
It's not too many notes. It's not a,
People
know,
think
too sparse.
people think just to tell a joke is,
Oh, no, not
but it
that
has to have a
size.
certain
It had a rhythm.
proportion, a certain rhythm, and these people were masters of it.
Also, those comedians, I might add, appreciated music. They had all of them, whether they sang or
Mhm.
danced or not, they had underscoring that this much music in their act, this much music in their act, and they appreciated
Well,
it. Now,
Caesar
I
used to
don't
do
know.
takes. Remember, we used to
Yeah.
do. I used to do a bit on the Greek piano concerto with
Oh,
him,
sure.
and he would come out as a nervous pianist making his debut at Carnegie Hall. And he would sit there playing an air like this, and I would be behind him playing the piano part. And people would be mesmerized by our synchronization because his fingers are always in exactly.
Well,
It wasn't just going like this. His fingers were exactly where they should be, and that's what.
He was great. Caesar was great. Burl was great. Those are great guys. Really great things.
Well, I want to thank you extremely much for the second of two programs. And for your father, a lifelong friend, we used to pray together at the Sutton Place Synagogue. Our greatest condolences on the loss of your mom.
Thank you.
And, you know, we have only one mother. And thank God that she lived as long as she did. Was a treasure. I knew her many, many years, and she produced a talented family and has a talented husband herself. Was a great blessing to everybody. And I wish you continued great success. Two virtuoso performers like I have never met. As a percussionist myself that ended my career voluntarily and early, I can...
But you're in law. By the way, I have a traffic ticket I need to... Anyway, we'll talk.
Yeah, and I'll enforce it with all
Yeah, you came to the right guy. Give him a $100 ticket. When he gets through with you, you'll have to pay $250.
Yeah, more than ever. And I look forward to many more encounters. And thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiny.